Okay, so hopefully a reasonably quick tutorial here. I'm just addressing a few things that I'm seeing come up a lot in the Facebook community for Elementor. It's to do with a couple of things. One is using SVGs as logos and how you size them correctly. The second thing is how to create your header layouts so that they work effectively. You get questions about elements not lining up properly, sitting on top of each other, all that sort of stuff. So I've got a way that I've worked out that I use on pretty much every site. I just wanted to share some of that thinking. So at the moment we can see we've just got a basic page on one of my dev sites, and it uses the standard header, which is part of the Hello Elementor theme, which it displays if we haven't defined a header through the Elementor theme builder. So I'm just going to show you how we go about this. So a couple of things first that we need to look at is if you're going to use SVGs, you need to make sure in Elementor, in the settings, under your advanced tab, you need to make sure enabled unfiltered uploads is enabled. Now there is a warning in there about SVG and JSONs and potential security risk. Now if you're creating these files yourself, that's not an issue. If you're getting them from other places, there's a potential for SVGs to include code which may expose things like login cookies and stuff that's stored in your browser. Now Elementor does make an effort to remove any scripts that it finds, but they do clearly state here that it's your risk. Now this is no different than using a plugin called like Safe SVG or anything like that. It does exactly the same thing. So you do not need an additional plugin for this. You just need to enable this in Elementor advanced settings. Okay, once we've enabled that, we can upload SVGs, JSONs, PDFs, all that sort of stuff we can actually upload, which we couldn't normally do without a additional plugin. Okay, so that's the basic settings there. Now, what we need to do is go and create a header. So we're going to our templates and then the theme builder. And at the moment I have no header template. So up here on the header box, I click on the plus, give me a new header. Now this brings up the library. I generally don't use these because quite often there's some odd styling in there, odd ways of doing things which you got to figure out and undo, and it can be just difficult to make it perfectly work with the rest of your site. So I tend to start without any of these. You can use some of these as inspirations if you want to, but if you do import them, you end up resetting a lot of the settings anyway. So I start with a blank template. So by default, it just gives us a unique name, Elementor header #221. We don't want that. We want to actually make sense. So we're going to call this standard header. Okay, so now our first header is called a standard header. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that in our site settings, we have under the site identity, we've got an SVG logo. I've uploaded my WPZ logo here, which is an SVG. So that's all good. If you don't have one, just upload it there. And I'm not going to worry about the favicon icon here. So that's the header that we're going to use. The image we're going to use. So we're going to create a single section, and we're going to make that full width. And I'm going to name this section desktop. I tend to create a desktop version and a mobile version, so it gives you better control. I mean, there are responsive things where you can turn things on and off, mobile or desktop. I like having more control than that, so sometimes things just get too messy depending on how complex your header is. If it's a very simple header with a logo and a menu, you probably don't need to, but if you want to alter what appears on your menu between desktop and mobile, I suggest creating two separate sections for that. So in the desktop one that we've just created, we're going to go into our responsive settings, and we're going to say we want to hide this on mobile and tablet. Okay, so initially I'm going to give this just a dark background just to work with my logo. So I'm just going to make it, say, a black, and then just darken, make that a bit less black, so a bit of a dark grey. There we go. Now, what most of the templates do, and what most people will do to create a header layout, is they'll create multiple columns. So you'll have a column with your logo on the left, a column with your nav menu in the middle, and on the right hand side you might have your social icons or a call to action or something like that. I don't use that method because it tends to be harder to control the widths. I want things to be spaced on what the actual elements take as far as space, not what the column is set to. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to show you my preferred method. So if I grab the site logo and I chuck it into there, I can see already I've got a problem, which I'll talk about resolving, where it's actually taking up only the height, making it very small. So I'm going to add a nav menu under that. Okay, I'm then going to add some social media buttons, maybe. Some social icons, I should say. Put that there. It might just make the size a little bit smaller so it fits in nicely with our header. And maybe a button. And the button might be a call to action. Okay, so there's the components I want for my standard header. Now, to make it lay out properly, go to each element. So the first one would be the site logo. And go to the site logo, and in the advanced, I want you to set the positioning on that one. Now, this one will be different to the other two. I want to set this to custom. I'm going to say this one is 250 pixels wide. Okay, it hasn't fixed our logo, but I'm going to come back to that. I then go to the nav menu, and I set that one to inline auto. Then go to my social media buttons, and I set that to inline auto. And the same with my button. Okay, so we've got them all lining up right next to each other. It's still not exactly what we want. So we come back to the column, and we want to set the horizontal line to be space between. Now that's a flex property where it will put the first element on the far left, the last element on the far right, and then evenly distribute the space between the others. So one other thing I'm noticing here is the alignment. These are all over the place, up and down. So I would then set my vertical line to middle. Now they're all lined up in the middle. Okay, coming back to this site logo. So that's not exactly what we want. Now the reason for that is when you set the width of this positioning, it's actually setting the width of the container that encloses that logo, not the width of the logo itself. So then we'll come back to the style tab, and we want it to be 100% of the container width, and that's how we get the size. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, right? Now I might just do a little bit of styling on here because that looks terrible at the moment. So I'm going to just make my text color white, set the typography to maybe secondary, that'll do. All right, so we then want to actually tell it where we want to put this. So we go display conditions, and we're going to add this to the entire site. So open the site and go to sample page, and there's our basic header. Okay, now it's probably not the right color for that logo. So what I'm seeing is the site logo far left, the click here button the far right, and then we've got equal space between the nav menu, the social icons, and the click here button. So what if we want to have the social media links and the click here button on the right hand side and the nav menu to take up the rest of the space? Easy. So go back to edit our standard header. And all we have to do is select that nav menu. Now we do have to do this with custom CSS, unfortunately. So in the custom CSS, we add the word selector to target the container for that nav, and we tell it we want the flex grow to be 1. So now you can see it's taken up all of the space that's available and then spread the rest of the stuff out here. So it doesn't quite look right because the nav menu is by default left aligned. So we'll come back to the content for that, and we're going to stick that in the middle there. Okay. Now we've got another problem here on the right hand side where these are butted up against each other. So I would select the click here button, go to the advanced, and add some left hand margin of say 20 pixels. Now that looks right. Okay, update that. And have a look at our sample page. So now we've got exactly what we wanted, where we've got left aligned logo, the nav menu taking up all the space, and right aligned social icons, and click here. So let's have a look what happens when we scale. As we move, they stay right, and then this drops down because there's not enough space to display it. Okay. And we've got no menu when we go to tablet because I've told it to hide it. So we'll go back to our standard header. Okay, so I'm just going to duplicate that section, and I'm going to call this mobile. And let's hide the desktop version for now. On the mobile, we want to change the responsive settings. So we want to hide it on tablet. Sorry, we want to show it on tablet and mobile, and we want to hide it on desktop. So let's go to our desktop tablet view and see what it looks like. Nothing like what we want, particularly when we get to mobile. That just looks terrible. So let's say on the mobile view, we don't want to have these calls to action social media buttons. We could just hide them. I think it's better to create a mobile version and just delete those. We'll take this here and make sure that is still on positioning as inline auto. We want to make sure that the where are we? The hamburger align is to the right. Maybe give it some color. The toggle button. Make that say white with a black background. And in the content for that, we want to make it full width, which I'll explain shortly why we do that. Now, one other thing I'll just add in there in the styling, in the drop down, just a very quick box shadow we'll put on there. Now, update that. I'm just going to right click and view the page here so I can come back to settings very easily. So, if we now go to our mobile view on this, so our tablet view, we've now got the drop down there. The other stuff's gone. Mobile view, drop down's there. Okay, I'm going to quickly show you the difference between having the full width set or not set for the mobile drop down. So if we set that to no, I'll just refresh this page. So when that's not set to full width, what it does is the added element is actually positioned relatively. So it actually takes up the space of that container, and then it extends the container to fill it in. When we set it to full width, it makes the drop down absolutely positioned and makes it the full width of the screen. So it's a really simple way, rather than having to do all this custom CSS to make that work, just make it full width and that works for you. So that's the very, very simple way that I manage these headers. Now, one other thing we're going to do is look at how do we make a sticky header. Now, one thing Elementor doesn't do well, I'm just going to get back to back end, is copying of templates. So the way we have to do that is an export and an import. So let's go back to our theme builder. And we've got a standard header going there. Now, there's no duplicate or copy. So the way we do this is we export it. And then what we now do is add a new header. And we want to import for some reason my button's not working. Okay, so import, select the file. This will be in my downloads. Okay, so there it is there. So it's given it the same name, which makes it difficult to know which one. It generally will be the second one, but what we're going to do is just close that and go back to our theme builder. Go back to our templates, theme builder. And you can see now we've actually got an Elementor header. Not sure where this one came from, which has got a random name on it. So we can rename it here. Trash that. Okay. So I'm not sure what happened in the import process here, but here we've got our original. And then we've got an imported one. We can tell because that one's the one we put on the entire site. This one is not. So let's rename that to our transparent header. And change that. And we'll also make this sticky as well. So now if we edit that, and we'll take our top nav that we're working on first, our top section, and we're going to go to our motion effects, and we're going to say we want it to be sticky on the top. It doesn't matter with these because we're only going to show this on the desktop anyway. And we're going to set an effects offset of, say, 100 pixels. Okay. And we're going to add a condition to this, and we only want to put this on a single page, which we will, page, and we're just going to put this on our sample page. And save that. Okay, so we made it sticky. If I view the page, I have my sample page, so the header is now sticky. Okay, it's as simple as that. I'm just going to add some lorem ipsum to this page so I can make it a bit longer. Just gives us a bit more stuff to scroll. Okay, so that's just the sticky header, which is pretty straightforward. Now, if you wanted to make this transparent, we'll go back to there, select our header, and make the color transparent. So we'll give it a fully transparent background. Okay, and then down in the custom CSS, we need to make the selector, so the position is absolute, and the width is 100%. Okay, so that makes it a sticky header that's transparent. That's a very simple part of it. Now let's go back to here and we'll have a look. Just Control F5 on there. Now we have a completely transparent header, which you can see there's always going to be a problem with this, where you've got to allow enough padding at the top of your page to clear these transparent headers, which is why I don't set this as the default. So if I look at the blog page, for example, it's going to use my standard header I just created. Look at the sample page. It's disappearing up behind here. So I'd have to put padding in that section to clear the header. Now, what we're going to do now is look at what happens when this scrolls. There's a really neat little thing I'm going to show you here. If I look at this section and I scroll, watch this change here. Whoops. So when I scroll by more than the offset pixels, I get this here added to the that section. So I copy that and I come back to our transparent header and I put in a selector. Got element sticky active, and I can change the background color to say black. Be whatever you like. So there you go. Oops, sorry, I've obviously selected the wrong thing. So it is I've used the wrong class. It's this one here that gets added. So the Elementor sticky effects. Just want that. Like that. Okay, so now I've got a transparent header. If I scroll by more than 100 pixels, I get the background as black. So that is because of this property here, which is under the motion effects, the pixel there. So if I made that, say, 200, I'll have to scroll by 200 pixels now before it goes black. Now I don't have enough text here to do that, so let's have a look at that. Unsurf. So there is my header there, which has got all the stuff behind it. When I scroll by more than 200 pixels, the background goes black. Okay, so that's pretty much a very simple explanation of how I handle headers. I'll probably do a little bit more to change the size of the logo, etc. when the scrolling happens. But that's essentially what you need to learn to be able to do this sort of thing.